Common sense dictates that those who sell millions and reach the top become legends. But in 1970, the reality was different. This video is about bands that had the perfect hit and the right moment, but history treated them as if they never existed. From Norman Greenbaum to Steam, the pattern repeats itself. The guy records the hit of his life, and months later, sees his image swallowed by his own music, while the system searches for the next disposable success. Spirit in the Sky sold millions of copies in 1970, but Norman Greenbaum was a Jewish man from Massachusetts who decided to write a hymn about Jesus with no real connection to the gospel tradition. He got the idea after seeing religious music on television and realizing it could work commercially. So he went into the studio with professional musicians, recorded the track quickly, and came out with a #1 hit that immediately put him on the map. But the success was never repeated, and Greenbaum spent the rest of his career carrying a single song that became bigger than anything he did afterward. Even with the track being used in films, commercials, and soundtracks for decades, guaranteeing a steady income, his name never returned to the center of the industry, as if that song had been a perfect accident that couldn't be replicated. And the more years passed, the more that song ceased to be an achievement and became a permanent shadow, too big to fit within a typical career. And while Spirit in the Sky continued to play decades later, in Chicago, an 18-year-old boy named Jim Peterick was writing a song about a guy in a car offering him a ride with ulterior motives, and how that would change his life in ways he never imagined. Vehicle climbed to the national top 3 in 1970 with a heavy, repetitive guitar riff that stuck in your head, and lyrics that many people thought were about a serial killer offering rides to women. But Jim Peterick said it was just about a personal situation, observing the dynamic between his girlfriend and another guy with a car. Then CBS invested heavily, putting the band on to open for major tours, and the self-titled album sold well before it became clear that there wasn't another single as strong as that one, leaving the group stuck with a single hit while trying to live up to their own expectations. Because the record label wanted another vehicle practically on the same level, and he couldn't deliver, the band's momentum faded in the early 70s, while Peterick continued trying to write something that would sustain that initial impact. Until years later, he reappeared with an unexpected turn, forming Survivor and writing Eye of the Tiger, proving that he still had a gigantic hit in store, just not at that moment. But while Jim Peterick was trying to stay relevant after the peak of the Ides of March, in New York, 2 producers put an impromptu group of session musicians in a studio to record a demo that was never meant to be released, but which would end up becoming the farewell anthem of the century. Na Na Hey Hey Kiss Him Goodbye topped the Billboard charts in 1969 and was still a hit in 1970. But it wasn't a band. It was just Gary DiCarlo singing about a breakup, while 2 producers put together a raw, quick, unpretentious studio recording using whatever they had on hand. They recorded it as a demo for another artist who never materialized, until Mercury Records decided to release the tape under the name Steam, because it sounded young and disposable enough to work. DiCarlo didn't want to be the face of a band that didn't exist, but he signed the contract because he needed the money. And when the single sold millions of copies and became an anthem in American football stadiums to this day, he no longer had control over what it had become. DiCarlo discovered that, on paper, he was just another name within a studio project, receiving a fraction of what the song generated, while others controlled the rights and profits. And when he tried to react, it was too late. The band was a fabrication, the success had no clear owner, and he was stuck with a recording that the whole world knew, but almost nobody knew where it came from. And while Gary DiCarlo watched his own voice travel the world without him at the center of the story, in London, 4 guys who played washboard and empty milk bottles in basements were about to record a summer anthem in 10 minutes that would pay for their drinks for the next 50 years.
In the summertime, when the weather is hot, you can stretch right up and touch.
In the Summertime topped the charts in July 1970, but Ray Dorset wrote that song in just a few minutes one afternoon in London, thinking only about beer and sunshine. Then he went into the studio with a skiffle band that included a guy blowing into a bottle and another playing improvised percussion. Recording the vocals in a raw, direct sound that let even the smallest imperfections through. Those imperfections ended up becoming part of the song's identity, and when the single exploded, selling tens of millions of copies, there were no re-recordings for the United States. It was precisely that original version that dominated the market. The success grew too quickly for a band that wasn't prepared to sustain it, leading to internal conflicts and lineup changes in the early years. Dorset received songwriting credit, but as was often the case at the time, the financial details weren't as straightforward as the size of the hit suggested. And while Ray Dorset was trying to find the money that the summer had earned but seemed so far away, in Manchester, studio musicians were recording an equipment test with primitive drums and grunts that was never meant to leave the studio, but which would end up being released as a single. Neanderthal Man reached the top 3 in the UK in 1970, but it wasn't a song, it was a sound check that Eric Stewart, Kevin Godley, and Lol Krem recorded at Strawberry Studios to test new tape equipment. It consisted only of repetitive kick drum beats and distorted guitars with minimal vocals. When Philips Records heard the tape, they thought it had potential and decided to release it as a single, leading them to become a real band called Hotlegs to promote the song. They played playback on Saturday night shows while trying to record more elaborate albums that didn't have the same impact. When the hit lost momentum after a few months, they tried to return to studio work, but the record company pressured them for more material in the same style, creating tension about the band's direction. Finally, in 1972, they changed their name to 10cc and proved they were much more versatile songwriters. But Neanderthal Man continued to follow them as an unexpected success that didn't represent all they were capable of. While the Hotlegs were trying to prove they were more than just an experiment that got out of control, at EMI, 2 men were discovering that they didn't need to be a real band to make a hit. Just create the right illusion in the studio. Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes topped the charts in 1970. But when the BBC invited the band to perform on Top of the Pops, Tony Burrows appeared as the main face, because Edison Lighthouse wasn't a traditional band. It was a studio project formed by session musicians. So the record label assembled musicians to create a TV lineup, having people represent the band while Burrows sang, presenting the public with a constructed version of something that never existed as a fixed group. And when the single sold 1 million copies, it became clear that the success didn't come from a real band, but from a studio system where the musicians didn't have a continuous identity, and the lineup changed as needed for promotion. Burrows ended up becoming the recurring face of that type of project, appearing in different groups and songs simultaneously, while the public saw different bands that, in practice, had the same voice. And while Tony Burrows appeared in multiple projects that looked like real bands but were actually studio setups, on the same station, another group was also preparing to perform a hit that didn't have a fixed band behind it, with him again on the microphone, ready to repeat the process. But before revealing what song this was and how Tony Burrows managed to be in 2 places at the same time, if you've made it this far and appreciate this kind of historical reenactment, leave your like and a comment below. Subscribing now ensures you won't miss the next deep dives.
She's the only one, make me feel so good, I believe my
My Baby Loves Lovin' reached the top 10 in 1970, and for the third time that year, Tony Burrows was on the microphone singing for a band that didn't have a fixed lineup. This time, however, the record label decided it needed a more lasting image, assembling a group to represent the White Plains on tours and public appearances. They sent Burrows to lip-sync on different TV shows, appearing in multiple projects during the same period, creating the sensation of several different bands with the same voice, while the audience didn't notice the repetition.
baby love, my baby loves love, and she's got what it takes.
And when the hit lost momentum after a few months, the project continued with lineup changes, while Burrows returned to work as a session singer. Having been the voice behind several hits in a short period, even without being the fixed face of any specific band, and while Tony Burrows returned to the studio routine, in Detroit, four guys with long hair and dirty beards were transforming traditional folk music into the heaviest sound to come out of Michigan since MC Rising Sun reached the top 10 in 1970. But it wasn't the Animals version. It was a distorted, fuzz-driven track with heavy drums, recorded by four guys from Detroit who had been playing together since high school. So when the single blew up, Parrot Records couldn't replicate the success with subsequent material, while the band tried to capitalize on a hit that was already bigger than any clear direction they had. This forced Frijid Pink to record 2 albums of original material that went unnoticed, trying to find an identity beyond the cover that put them on the map, until guitarist Gary Ray Thompson left in the early 70s, marking the beginning of the end for the original lineup. And while Frijid Pink were trying to prove that Detroit could be heavy without being political, in London, a band called the Tremolos rejected a song that would become the world's #1 hit, leaving bassist Jeff Christie to record it alone and prove them wrong. Yellow River reached the top of the charts in the UK in 1970, but Jeff Christie almost didn't record it because it was originally written for the Tremolos, who did record the track but didn't release it as a lead single. So Christie took the demo, went into a studio with session musicians, and recorded the hit in a relatively quick session, releasing the version that would become the song's biggest success, selling over 1 million copies during its peak circulation period. However, when the Tremolos heard the hit, there wasn't a direct, officially competitive release that rivaled Christie's version. He tried to replicate the success with other singles, but none worked at the same level. In 1973, CBS didn't renew his contract because he couldn't repeat the same level of commercial success within the label. He then pursued a musical career throughout the 1970s with various activities and tours, retaining the rights as a performer and songwriter according to the contracts of the time. In 14 minutes, it became clear that the 1970s model spared no one. From ghostly voices like Tony Burrows to the heaviness of Frijid Pink, the system worked the same way. It extracted maximum profit and discarded the face behind the music. Some became studio workers, others lost the rights to their own work, and some simply couldn't handle the pressure of being one-hit wonders. When you look at Steam, Mungo Jerry, or Hotlegs, the coincidence disappears, and what remains is the logic of the industry. Comment which of these hits you remember fondly, and we'll see you in the next video.